Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our little podcast here, all about everything podcast hosted by yours truly, friends. I know it's been a long time since we last uploaded an episode here, and I'm so glad to finally be back. So much has gone by throughout the months, and I'm really excited to restart this whole podcast and New Year 2023. And with this episode, I'm going to cut straight to the chase. I've recently read a book. I'm in a zone. I'm up, and I'm going to talk about the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. So for this book, this is written by Taylor Reid Jenkins, a New York Times bestseller. There are no spoilers here on this episode, so this one is a safe venue for those who have just started reading the novel and for those who wanted to start anytime soon. I finished reading the book overnight, and I think this is the fastest one that I've come to read for ages, and I assure you, this book did not disappoint. So, Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is an excellent example of a novel where the author has intelligently sold the importance of its first 10 pages. The author really set the tone on those first few pages, answered the what, the why, and gave you the baseline of who is who to who across the story. An indication for me that a story is good in its writing is at the first few minutes into reading, you find yourself asking the whys. And among all those whys, the big major why. For this story, I considered that big major why gives us the reason why the famous bombshell starlet such as Evelyn Hugo specifically chose an unknown journalist, the character Monique Grant, to feature her tell-all story. I also found one commendable thing about the author Taylor was that it was her ability to drop hints now and then, leading up to the answers, but also leaving you in subtle cliffhangers, in which she will take you for a reveal in the next following chapters, giving you more reason to keep on reading. The story touches base on different topics that are all relevant then and now, despite it being set back in the 60s, throughout the 80s, and early 90s. Sexuality, race, popularity, and gender roles and differences, equality as well, somehow, were discussed at their different pace and levels, and it was splendidly written in a span of 400 pages or so. The story is complex, but it is not difficult to read. Anyone with little to no exposure to reading can easily warm up to the language of the story. It is discreetly provocative, yet vulnerable and direct from a female gaze. Taylor Reid Jenkins is excellent at painting you your mental image of the characters as they were introduced. It's in a manner that doesn't get you distracted from what is happening at the moment. Oftentimes, based on the books I've read from the past from some famous authors, they are very big on descriptions to a point that after going through all of that, readers like me tend to slip into remembering that, yeah, right, this is what is happening. Okay, cool, then let's continue. This story, the pacing of this is not like that. The author introduces, she describes, and then bam, she gets you to the bottom of the scene at a flick of a hand. The description of how every character looks, how they move, and their gestures and little nuances are also wonderfully narrated, as if it feels like you are a third person in every sequence. It's like you are inside that same room they are in, watching in full 360 view. One thing I noticed about this book is that the character developments on this are subtle, but it's wonderfully laid out. Like, it doesn't get you through the long process of having to deal with characters that goes through long perceived stages of development. It's like a character is as it is, but then next thing you know, she's turned like this and she have turned out like that. they are insanely human in a sense from a book. Each one has their flaws that they work on, some admittedly unconventional, like Evelyn, and it contrasts that of Celia's vulnerability and openness. Evelyn is lipstick smart. You can tell that right off the bat by reading into her point of view. She's unapologetically bold and wise, even already at her younger years, and she became more the game than the player playing the game, in a sense, as her character progresses into years of her career speak, and even on her personal downfall by the near end when everything regroups and she was faced with reality that she can't literally have it all. I would personally rate the book as 9 over 10, and some of you may wonder if it's so good, friends. Why not 10 over 10? I'd say the story checks all what I love about a book. It's a page turner, it's engaging, it's glamorous, it gets you hooked, it has colors in it, you can envision it, it has the right amount of complexity to it, it gets you on a roller coaster ride of emotion. But from the writer's standpoint, from my end, it's predictable and at the same time unpredictable, as it managed to settle the boundary between a normal retelling of a story through two different perspectives and being able to deliver those two by just letting what's happening be told as it is in plain pages in a newspaper or a magazine. It's a 9 over 10 for me, as its theme is not new. There are many novels out there that tackles about same-sex relationships during the 50s and moving forward until today. I think the difference was that on this book, it was written in a way that attracted readers because it was so unique. They didn't even notice that this has been a kind of story that's been on the front of being told now and then. It holds such a charisma to the readers, so much like me that it makes me giddy about thinking of the possible adaptation of like into a film in the near future. So if I were a reader with no experience with this kind of theme and genre, I'd probably rate it as 10 over 10 right off the bat, of course. But given my personal scale and preferences, I'm going to leave it at 9 over 10. So, Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is a great story and it's an excellent book. You will really get to the gist of the story first 10 pages, but you won't regret to read it until the last page. So I definitely would recommend it. And yeah, I think that's it for today's episode. Let me know about your thoughts. If you have more books that are similar to this or same themes, or ones that you think will get me hooked right until the last page, feel free to comment them all in here. And I thank you so much for listening to this episode. I'll see you until the next one. Okay, cool. I'm out.